Many modern pagans and Wicca celebrate a horned god. But who is this god, and where did he come from? And why is he so cool looking? This week I'm going to speak about the awesomeness that is Cernunnos. In Celtic mythology, Cernunnos was the horned god who ruled over wild beasts and places. He's most commonly associated with forests, wild animals, fertility and wealth. Cernunnos is often depicted with prominent stag antlers on his head and was known as the Lord of the Wild Places or God of the Wilds. There are very few surviving details about the horned Celtic god Cernunnos, but what little we know about the origins of this horned god we make up for by using the name Cernunnos to refer to many similar Celtic horned deities whose names and mythology have disappeared under the sands of time. While still a mystery, Cernunnos has experienced a kind of modern revival since the 19th century, as he makes appearances in Wicca symbolism and has been featured in pop culture, artwork and music. It's anyone's guess as to whether Cernunnos we know today is anything but an imitation of the original horned god of the Celtic religion. Cernunnos' origins remain a mystery, as there's no surviving literature to inform us of the deity's mythology. In fact, the only piece of evidence around today is known as the Pillar of the Boatman, a column erected in what is now Paris in the 1st century AD. On this Roman column there remains the image of a horned deity, one torque hanging from each of its two antlers. The inscription Cernunnos is present, the C having been erased by time and damage. The inscriptions on the pillar are written in Latin and feature some Gaulish language. Although only the top half of this horned deity remains visible, scholars familiar with other presumed depictions of Cernunnos posit that he was likely seated in a cross-legged position, as there was no room on the pillar to have him depicted seated in a chair or standing. The Pillar of the Boatman is the only place where this horned god appears in tandem with the name Cernunnos from that time period, although there are other similar beings depicted in Celtic mythology and, in fact, many other ancient religions. There's no empirical evidence that they are depictions of Cernunnos. Perhaps the most well-known depiction of what is thought to be Cernunnos is on the Gundestrup cauldron, which is estimated to date from somewhere between 150 BC and 1 BC. It is the largest known artefact from the European Iron Age. Found in a peat bog in Denmark in 1891, this incomplete silver cauldron features a horned figure sitting cross-legged and surrounded by animals. The figure is holding a snake in one hand and a torque in the other. He also has a torque around his neck. There are various animals surrounding him on this silver cauldron, including an antlered deer, with which he is often associated. Although the Gundestrup cauldron was found far outside of Gaul, some experts believe its workmanship is Gaulish or Thracian in origin. The depictions of the figures in the metalwork are thought to be characteristic of Celtic polytheism, although some find this unproven assertion controversial. Cernunnos is thought to be a god of the wild, always appearing with horns on his head and often appearing around wild animals in various depictions. As the ruler of the wild things, Cernunnos could very well have been the god of the hunter for some ancient Celts, while also being the god of fertility, since the wilderness was often believed to be the birthplace of all life. Likewise, some posit that this Celtic deity could have been seen as a god of the underworld, since hunting ends in death for the hunted. However, there's no evidence in ancient Gaul text or objects that this was the case. Although called the horned god, Cernunnos is often depicted with stag antlers and a great beard, further emphasising his wild, animal-like visage. Building on this image, modern pagan groups have given Cernunnos the name Lord of Wild Things. In the Pillar of the Boatman mentioned earlier, Cernunnos appears with torques around his horns, but in other depictions he's seen wearing them or holding them, as in the Gundestrup cauldron. His appearance is also associated with the horned serpent and the stag. He may also be associated with dogs, rats and bulls. While there are no specific surviving myths that relate directly to Cernunnos, there are Celtic myths relating to horned gods that may or may not refer to Cernunnos. One of them is about a character in Shakespeare's play The Merry Wives of Windsor that some scholars have attributed to Cernunnos. The character's name is Herne the Hunter, and, in the play, he kills himself rather than live in shame after committing a grave offence. He then haunts the forest, terrorising any wild animals unlucky enough to cross his path. Some insist that this depiction of the Cernunnos-like character was around long before Shakespeare wrote the play, but there's no strong evidence of this. The similarities could be coincidental or based on another horned deity. Another one is related to a character from Irish mythological tales, namely the Ulster cycle stories, which shares certain minor similarities with Cernunnos. The appearance of a snake in the tale is one similarity, as the protagonist Conall Cernach faces off against the serpent, who is blocking the way to a treasure. But it isn't just the serpent that has made some think of the god Cernunnos. The name, Cernach, could be referring to horns as prominent growths. Conversely, it could simply mean angular or possessing corners. Other translations say it could mean triumphant. There seems to be little evidence that Cernach and Cernunnos are one and the same. The modern version of Cernunnos is still the god of wild places, signifying the birth and death cycle of the seasons. In spring, the antlered god signifies the birth and fertility as the land awakens. In this sense, Cernunnos exists as one with the goddess of fertility and the divine feminine, which some say he draws his powers from. The horned god grows older as the year does the same, dying in winter only to be reborn again in spring, awakening the land once again with the mother goddess. Although some ancient Celtic religions may have worshipped a horned god in a similar manner, at once the god of the underworld and the spirit of rebirth, there is no evidence to suggest that Cernunnos was worshipped as such by any Celtic tribe. Modern neo-pagan traditions borrowed heavily from Murray's suppositions in what was known as witchcraft in the 1950s, but is now typically referred to as Wicca. This is why horned deities today are often associated with neo-paganism and the occult. There are easily recognisable horned deities that are around today. One of these is Baphomet, a god whose first recorded mention comes thanks to the Knights Templar in 1307. But the symbol most recognised today and called by the same name was drawn by Eliphas Levi in the 19th century. The original drawing was of a cross-legged figure with a goat's head and horns. Between the goat's horns sat a torch, and on the goat's forehead was a pentagram. According to Levi, the sabbatical goat was meant to represent balance through opposites, as in the half-animal, half-human figure. The male and female features, the figure in the original drawing had breasts, and the figure's hands pointing in opposite directions. It's not hard to see the similarities to Cernunnos. In fact, Murray used Baphomet and some of Levi's writings to support her theory that all the horned gods were essentially the same, and that the church decreed any worship of them devil worship. The horned goat head and pentagram have since been adopted by Satanist groups. There are even modern statues of Baphomet, although some details have been changed from Levi's original concept. The horned gods Pan and Silvanus from Greco-Roman mythology are another couple of well-known examples. These were also gods of wild places, and they were most often depicted with goat horns as opposed to antlers. Wotan, a horned god of Germanic origin, is thought to be a version of the Norse god Odin. Wotan was a god of the wild hunt, and may have even been believed to rule over wild animals. We'll never know if all these gods were based on one, or, as is more likely the case, their similarities are coincidental. But one thing's for sure, horned gods have been a staple of many religions over the years, and their symbolism, although transforming, won't likely be waning anytime soon. Thanks for watching everyone. Till next time, yours truly, Mythos, the Historian.